Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. Today we have a proxy battle to become the horological king of Paris by way of Switzerland. It's Cartier versus Hermes versus starts now. I have to admit that I wasn't expecting this comparison to ever happen. It's difficult to find these watches in the same place at once, and in fact, this particular watch is a bit of a unicorn, as it is the graphene version of the H08, which is rarely seen. But rarely have I seen two more perfectly matched watches in a versus comparison. This one is going to come down to the details. So let's start with the better known of these two, both as a model and as a model line. So launched in 2018, the current generation of the Cartier Santos de Cartier is the present incarnation of the world's oldest pilot's watch. The original Cartier Santos was created in 1904 by Louis Cartier for his aviator friend, Brazilian Alberto Santos Dumont, but he was not a pilot of airplanes. He was a pilot of dirigibles, airships, and so it was impossible to operate one of these labor-intensive craft without both hands. So reaching into a pocket to find a pocket watch simply wasn't practical. A wristwatch was the answer, and in the process, the Cartier Santos, as it came to be named, became one of the first ever wristwatches, first ever sports watches, and by a large margin, the first ever pilot's watch. 2018 brought the current generation of the platform, and 2020 brought this, the Santos de Cartier Large ADLC, amorphous diamond-like carbon. It is a super scratch-resistant black coating on a stainless steel base. Now, the watch itself has not changed in size since 2018, so the large is really more of a medium by industry standards. It is 39.8 millimeters from side to side, not including the crown or guards, 9.5 millimeters thick, and 47.7 millimeters from basically lug to lug. I say basically lug to lug because when this watch is on a strap that hasn't been broken in or buckled down, we'll give ourselves a little bit more distance here, you can see that the strap has a little bit of lateral flare or stiffness to it, but it wears beautifully on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. And I should mention this watch, which has a quick release lug system, comes with a second accessory strap which is black and designed to look like a black bracelet, although it is in fact a strap. So you get this leather strap, you get the deployant clasp, you get the rubber strap, and a quick release system. The watch is short enough across the wrist and thin enough that it'll wear on a smaller wrist than mine. I think you could wear this on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. It easily clears a cuff, and it is a wonderfully thin timepiece, by about a millimeter thinner than its opposition here. Let's take a look at the strap. As you can see, it's a nice piece integrated with the case band. We'll do a quick zoom in, and you can see how it does close the flank of the case. There's no daylight between them. We have that quick release system I mentioned. You simply press a trigger, and it pops out just like that. And so you pop in the alternative strap and you are out and on your way. Now, of course, you can stick it right back in. It works just like a car seat belt buckle. The clasp is an updated version of the long-running Cartier deployant clasp, which first debuted in 1909. Louis Cartier designed that too. It was by far the first ever folding clasp, by decades, the first ever folding clasp. Now, this one's a little bit different because it features trigger release, which is a new addition to Cartier sports watch clasps. Previously, you had the same system that Cartier designed, which was a snapshot. This gives you a little bit more security against accidental deployment. It is steel, and what happens is you actually tuck the strap into the buckle, then everything folds down, clinches, and there's no need for strap minder loops on the strap. You'll see that the Hermes has strap minder loops, whereas here, because the excess length actually gets captured under the clasp and the strap, it's a much cleaner look when the strap is sized down and closed. And remember, this watch comes with two straps. The case is simple. You can see it's got a little bit of a camber to it as the lugs arc down at the edges. There's a bevel that runs the length of the lugs and the case. It's polished. The rest is satinated. ADLC is super scratch resistant, and while in theory you could scratch down to the metal, I have yet to see that in practice. This is a very resilient material. The majority of it is black and satinated. The bolts that fix the bezel in place are polished for contrast, and then we have a vertical satin finish on the dial with the typical radially arrayed stylized Roman numerals, including a watchmaker's 4 and the Cartier secret signature. We have blackened hands at center. We're going to do a quick loom shot here. You're going to find this is one of the real advantages of the Cartier relative to the Hermes. And then the date disc features white on black, which is exactly what you want to find. 100 meters water resistant, albeit with a push down crown, not a screw down. We have caliber 1847 MC, which is an in-house Cartier automatic, 42-hour power reserve, stop seconds, quick set date, 4 hertz beat rate, 23 joules, but significantly here, 1,200 Gauss anti-magnetic. So this has a lot going on, even beyond what you might expect for a watch from a company like Cartier, as I certainly didn't see more than mil-Gauss anti-magnetism coming. Let's take a quick look at what Hermes hath wrought. So launched 1 year later for 2021, this isn't a variation on an existing model line. This is the Hermes H08 or H08. It is the graphene model. H08 was an all-new model line, and somewhat in the spirit of the previous Carré H. Hermes, of course, is a stylish brand that's still relatively new to watchmaking, and so several versions of this were released, of which the graphene is by far the most exclusive and exotic. So although they describe this confusingly as an extra-large 42mm watch, I was not able to find a 42mm dimension by measuring every single facet of this watch. It is 39mm wide from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, not including the crown. They claim that lug-to-lug it's a 42, but in fact I measure it as a 46. The space between the lugs is 21mm, and the thickness of the case is 10.5mm. So I encourage you to just consider this as a 39mm wide watch, because that's really the way to think of it. Now, although several materials were launched, this is the most interesting. The bezel is double finished black ceramic for scratch resistance. The case is a carbon composite called graphene, which is both immensely scratch resistant and very light. So we have sapphire, we have ceramic, we have graphene, and then the case back is blackened titanium. So this watch made of those materials is feathery light. Although it's also 100 meters water resistant, it does have a screw down crown, which I consider to be just a little bit more robust and reliable. Now the strap here is integrated, but you do get a conventional 21mm lug, which means you can put any 21mm strap in here, whereas with the Cartier, you're kind of stuck with the corporate proprietary straps. There is a Hermes monogram on the bottom, and you can see the strap has sort of a textile-like pattern embossed on the top. The clasp is a wonderful piece. It's true, we have to deal with the strap minders here, but the clasp itself is brilliant. First things first, it's a twin trigger release, which I always like, and it's a double fold, which is friendlier on a small wrist. The clasp is made of blackened titanium. You can see it has ceramic spring-loaded pin snaps, so over time, the tolerances will remain snappy as the titanium cannot aggress against the ceramic. There is a push-button incremental slider built in for fine-tuning the fit, and I love to see that. This clasp is not a Hermes proprietary piece. Anyone can buy this clasp, but they were smart to spec it. It has a lot of smart elements, and you can see it is, however, Hermes branded, and it has a little bit of a superstructure on top of the basic buckle, so the buckle itself resembles the layering of the bezel and the case. Now, the case is a fascinating piece. It's basically a cushion case, somewhere between a cushion and a tonneau. You can see that the ceramic bezel is polished on its flank, but it has this lapping machine radial satin grain around the sides, so it's got that satin grain, and then it's got a sort of pebbly frosted sandpaper-like texture. The dial here is much more elaborate and, in my opinion, of a higher quality and more thoughtful than the Cartier. The Cartier is classic, but there's no ambition here, whereas this watch features a typeface that was created only for the model, and I appreciate that. Moreover, the attention to detail is superb. They use what they called black gold coating on this, and it does look the part. The numerals are all applique rather than printed. We'll screw out the crown, and you can see we have the hour track. We have a satin finished inner track for hours, and I guess you can also read minutes against it. But then we have a date disc, which, like the Cartier, is white on black, but you can see that that custom typeface that's used on the rest of the dial is also used on the date disc. So there you have 8, there you have 8. Everything matches, and this attention to detail is pleasing. Both of these watches retail for $8,100, but I feel like you're getting more quality with the Hermes. That continues on the reverse side, where you can see the movement is visible. It is Vaucher-based. Hermes is a major stakeholder in the Parmigiani companies. That's why Parmigiani watches feature Hermes straps. Vaucher manufacture builds movements for Hermes watches. That's why the Vaucher star sits on the base plate here. This is the Hermes caliber 1837. So it's adjusted in 5 positions like a chronometer. It sits on 28 pivot joules. It beats away at 4 hertz. It has a free sprung balance adjusted in those 5 positions. Stop seconds, quick set date, just like the a Cartier, but what it has here is a much higher level of finish with the Hermes monogram on the bridges and the rotor. We have engine turning on the base plate. We actually have quite credible mirrored anglage on the edge of the bridges, which is nice to see. We get a 50-hour power reserve rather than 42, and we get twin mainspring barrels rather than one. So what this does is it doesn't add that much more power reserve. This gets an extra 8 hours, but the two barrels mean there's a much more even torque release, so you don't get a balance that first gallops and then slows down unduly after 24 hours, whereas with the single barrel of the Cartier, it's a bit more susceptible to running fast when fully wound and slow when discharged. And again, the finish is quite attractive. It's not entirely artisanal. There's a lot of machine finishing here, but some elements like the beveling in particular and the solarization on the barrels, quite attractive and worthy of the price. So let's talk about some of the advantages here. The Hermes is the new kid in town, so we'll start there. Movement spec, longer power reserve, twin barrels, 5-position adjustment, free sprung. The finish is to a higher quality and visibly so. I would also say, in addition to having an outright advantage in movement, tech, spec, and finishing quality, there's also the advantage in that we have a display case back. So while this isn't ultimately high horology, it is worth seeing, and you're able to see it. Fun fact, this sapphire here is smoked. The movement's conventional rhodium-plated brass, but the smoked sapphire gives it that darkened look that fits with the graphene. I would also say, realistically, this fits conventional straps, so if you want to accessorize with a different strap, you can here, whereas you cannot here. What else do I love? Greater exclusivity. Cartier builds a lot of watches, and a lot of them are the Santos, whereas Hermes builds very few watches, and only some of those are going to be the H08, and very, very few of those are going to be the Graphene model, which is the most exclusive and most expensive. So this has greater exclusivity than any other H08, but it also has more exclusivity in all likelihood than any standard Santos, so you're not going to see a lot of them. Clasp quality here is high. While it does feature minder loops, and I do like the clean concealed length feature that you get with the Cartier. Here, I like the ceramic pin snaps. I like the easy on the wrist double folding action. I like the sliding micro adjustment. I just think this is a better overall clasp. What else do I like? Well, dial quality. Applique numerals, polished hands, black gold, multiple finishes, custom typeface. There's nothing I don't love here about the way the dial looks, but there is one big advantage that the Cartier has in that regard that we're going to explore in a moment. I should mention that they are both inadequately warranted. Each brand sells the watch new with a 24-month warranty, and in this era of 3, 4, 5, even 8 and 10-year warranties, 24 months is no longer suitable for $8,100 watches, and that is what these both cost. This watch costs $8,100 new. It'll sell for $7,500 to $8,000 pre-owned. This one, $8,100 new pre-owned. It's going to be about $7,000 to $7,500. So let's talk about the advantages of the Cartier. Important to note, small price advantage if you buy it used, about $500 less than if you buy the Hermes used. Magnetic resistance. Hermes doesn't state a magnetic resistance, so I assume it is 4,800 ampere per meter. Remember, 1000 Gauss or 1000 Gauss is 80,000 ampere per meter. That is 1000 Gauss. Well, this isn't 80,000, it's more. This is 1200 Gauss. Very impressive for a watch that is not at face value an engineer or technician timepiece. So 1200 Gauss anti-magnetism. A little bit of a price advantage. 2 straps and the quick release system. So you get 2 straps here, which to me represents value since one of the straps is alligator leather, not even calf, but gator, the good stuff. And you get that quick release system that makes it easy to swap between them. Lume power. We may as well just do a quick lume shot here because the Cartier is a much more luminescent watch, and really it's not even close. Once the Hermes starts to fade in particular, the Cartier is a much better lumed watch. The only real lume advantage that the Hermes has is that it has a luminescent seconds hand, which I always like to see, but within 10 minutes, the Hermes is going to be rather challenging to read, and the Cartier is going to have an edge. So advantage Cartier Santos. Also, There is real history and heritage here, dating back to 1904, and the Santos is one of the most important watch designs. It is an icon, even within a collection at Cartier, that is simply groaning and overflowing with icons. The Santos is the real deal, and first is the flag that flies forever. This design has been around since 1904, the original pilot's watch, one of the earliest wristwatches and sports watches of any kind, and although it's not a huge advantage, the Cartier is significantly thinner by 1.1 millimeter, and that does have some impact on the way that they wear. So let's talk a little bit then about which watch I would pick, since these are almost identical in size and price, and even appearance is very similar here. I'm going to opine that I like the thinner Cartier, I like its superior lume, I like its double strap equipment straight from the factory. I don't have to buy anything extra. I love its 1200 Gauss anti-magnetism. I love the fact that it is enduring, timeless, evergreen. There will be no calculated obsolescence or planned obsolescence, whereas Hermes, relatively new to watchmaking, and the H08, very new to watches, even by Hermes standards. I don't know where this is going to be in 100 years, but I know for a fact this will still be recognizable as a Cartier Santos. So you guys let me know, which of these two would you choose for your wrist? Two watches from Paris by way of Switzerland from great luxury brands. Again, let me know in the description below. Is it Cartier? Is it Hermes?